We are here at a location that we haven't discussed yet, but longtime subscribers to the channel will recognize all three of these cars, not just for their models, but actually having appeared in previous videos. I needed to put together an introduction for what you're going to see in the video here, which is a car that is owned by the newest member of the Undiscovered Classics Club, our buddy Steven. This is a car that we've been aware of that has kind of come out of the woodwork a few times over the last 10-15 years or so, and actually recently came up for sale and was purchased by our friend Steven. Never really knew much about the car, never was able to really track down any of the information. The person selling it didn't really know much about it except that her father had bought it, I think she said in the 70s. And we only had a couple clues to go off of. We had a registration from 1964 and a registration from 1974. The registration from 1964 was in Palo Alto, and it belonged to a guy named Edgar Smith. And then the one from the 70s also belonged to Edgar Smith. So we're starting to put some information together, and that gave us a little bit to go off of in our research. Now, any historian will tell you, when you're researching an individual, the last name Smith is just about the last name you want, because there's a lot of them. Doesn't make the job any easier. Edgar is obviously a little bit more of a unique name. Didn't really have much luck. I did find what I had assumed was information about him. He had passed away in 1980, but it all kind of started coming together when I found information about his wife, Orva, which is obviously a much more unique name, and that's where the story starts to get interesting. So between both of their obituaries, I was able to determine that they had two kids. At the time, I knew that the daughter had passed away, but I thought the son might actually still be alive, which would have put him probably in his 80s or 90s. Later found out that he actually passed away in 2017, so kind of all the hopes of being able to connect the car with an original living family member from father to son didn't really come to fruition on that front. A little spoiler, Steven was actually able to find the grandkids, so he's actually in touch with the family. They were ecstatic to hear that the family car survived, and he's waiting to hear back from them to see if they have any additional photos or information in some of their old family albums, so maybe there'll even be an update to this car in the future. So even with the information that was available in the obituaries for both Orva and Edgar, it really wasn't a lot to go on. You know, his obituary is from 1980. Hers was from 2000, which is a little bit more helpful, but that's still almost 25 years ago. So I started running down as many possible leads as I could. First and foremost, the obituary for Edgar noted which funeral home handled his arrangements, so called them up. They're still in business, the Burns Funeral Home. And the gal at the front desk was super helpful, went to go take a look at their hard copy files, did in fact find records of it, but the information they had was pretty much identical to the information I already had. So nothing new there, but at least one more lead to check off the list. She had a great suggestion, which was to actually find out where his wife had her funeral arrangements handled, because it was in 2000 as opposed to 1980. So you might actually get luckier on that front. Unfortunately, her obituary didn't indicate who handled the funeral arrangements, but it did indicate that she was in an assisted care facility. Called them up. They were still in business, and just like everybody else in the process here, the administrator at the care facility was super helpful. Thought we might have hit a major snag very early on, though. I guess about 3 years ago they shredded and purged all of their older records, of which they assumed hers was. But again, they surprisingly found a hard copy, and in that hard copy was a phone number for their son, which at the time I did not know had passed away, so I was super excited about that. Phone number was still live and active, left a couple messages, never heard back. Now it makes sense why. So then I started thinking, well, as some of you guys know, I work in historic preservation for my day job. The car stuff is just a hobby, although probably equal in time consumption and money to the day job. But I started thinking about what would I be doing here if I was researching a building? Well, I'd be contacting local resources. So first and foremost, I contacted the History Museum in Elko, Nevada, which had come up a few times between the obituaries. They had moved between a couple different places in Nevada, having left Palo Alto in California. And they, like everybody else, were super nice. The archivist did some digging. They found the same obituaries, which didn't really provide any new information. But again, it did help me close out one more lead. Then I had found out that they had lived in Fallon, Nevada, a few times, and it looked like actually Edgar had a business in Fallon, so I figured, maybe we get lucky there. Turns out that Edgar had a steel fabrication business with his brother in the 40s, so now we're starting to put together a story where, okay, we got this guy who's on the registration, which is only one piece of the puzzle, and then it turns out he was a steel fabricator. This car's done in steel, so a lot of the pieces are starting to come together here to make a educated guess that he is the original builder, which turns out to be the case. Even in his wife's obituary, it did note that her husband was a machinist, tinsmith, and inventor. So, same guy, right? Absolutely the same guy. Turned out he was the builder, so that was pretty exciting to put those two pieces together. Hit absolute pay dirt with the archivist at the Churchill County Museum in Fallon, Nevada. Not only did they have information on the Smith family, Edgar and Orva, but they had information I hadn't been able to find anywhere else up to this point. This is a couple weeks worth of research, really going down the rabbit hole, probably when I should have been doing other things, but you know. The car that you're gonna see here was built, purpose-built as a race car by Edgar Smith, and it was the last race car they built, which tells you that they built previous ones. So the archivist actually dug up a bunch of photos that they had in the file for the family with previous race cars they had built in the 30s and the 40s. They even had a photo of this car, which I'll include, I think, right up here. And it noted on the back, this is the last race car built by the Smith family sometime around 1965. That starts lining up with our timeline really nicely and starting to put a nice bow on things. So if you look at the styling, Jeff and I feel pretty confident that this is probably a project that started in the 50s. Guessing that it was either wrapped up by 64, or maybe there's a registration paperwork piece that we don't have that's from the 50s, or maybe they just drove this thing around unregistered and finally figured maybe around 1964 they should probably do something about it. But based on the styling, it looks 50s. So I just wanted to share with you some of the background information. I was really thankful for a lot of the people along the way, the archivists at the museum, the folks at the funeral home and the assisted living facility that really helped continue the path of the research here. And thankful for Steve for not only rescuing the car, but getting it back on the road after, I don't know, 40 years off the road based on the previous owner's information. So I hope you guys enjoy what Steve put together here. Make sure you go and follow him on his own YouTube channel, which is where these videos come from, which is Square Peg Fabrication. Hope you guys enjoy.
As many of you know, I like to build weird cars and projects like that, do a lot of fab work. It's a lot of fun. This time I'm taking on something that someone built a very long time ago, powered by a Ford Y block. It's a little pop-up looking headlights, but they're screwed down right now. Little roadster. Big Columbia 2-speed rear end is what I think that is. Nice set of gauges. And a couple of vintage racing seats. They say powered by a Y-block Ford V8. Look at this thing. This drives the tachometer with a belt. Crazy. Well, let's get this off the trailer and get it inside and get it up on the rack and see what the underside looks like. This thing's really a mystery. So tube frame, as you can see, straight axle with a transverse leaf spring. Very nice construction on the frame. Body attaches to the frame and unbolts. Looks like part of the reason for the roughness of the body was somebody trying to make this front end flip, and when they welded in all the support braces, they warped the daylights out of the metal and then tried to hammer it back and didn't really know what they were doing. Wild on this thing is there's boxes here for the headlights, and it looks like there were cables that went right up here on the firewall to a little knob on the dash so you could open them by hand from inside. Unknown Y block. I've got to figure that out. It's missing a starter. Not sure what that steering box is from. Has a Mallory Mag Spark system with the transformer and the dual point distributor. It's a Holly 4000 teapot carb, which should date this thing to about 1956. Radiator looks modern, or somewhat modern. Cross flow, I think. I don't see a fill anywhere. It really does look like almost like a GM crossflow. But that would date it to the 80s, 70s at least. Well, maybe even late 60s. Okay. I'll tell you, we're supposed to just open the hood. Apparently that wasn't a big enough hole, so they made the front end flip. So we're going to pick this up the rest of the way and see what's underneath it. All right, well, this wasn't what I was expecting. The entire underside is covered all the way back. Wow. Brakes are 12.5-inch, I believe. Kind of hard to measure them without taking them apart, but 12.5 or 13. Now this is kind of crazy. Someone's taken this pan, was a front sump pan, and welded on another part of the sump to increase the capacity. Wild. Nice job. Not sure if the engine's a 312 or a 292, but it's definitely a 56. Whoever built the chassis knew what he was doing. Oh, come on. And a little bit of choke. All right. Okay, well, we got it to pop and run for a minute. Trying to run this thing on a gravity feed right now because I haven't got a fuel pump for it. So it's a little tricky that way. I've also got a bit of a coolant leak. Looks like that water pump didn't survive its hibernation, but we're going to go ahead and try and start it again. See if it'll stay idling. I think it will. Uh-oh. There she goes. Lifter tick or something. Let's see. Low pressure 50 pounds. Not bad. Don't like that knocking sound though. Thought I'd give you a look at the underside of this thing. Definitely, the engine is most definitely a 312. I've verified that now. Saw the dot on the crankshaft that proves that. Get a look at where the exhaust is. It's tucked up in here. Then exits right there, the body. Through the body. Crazy. You look at how they attach the body, you know, it's all welded. Looks like with arc welding. Ground down and then some lead seams. Leaded over the seams. Looks like the shackle was custom made. Then they've got rubber covers under the diff and the ends of the axles where the U-bolts go. Mechanisms for the headlights. It's geared and it just lifts this whole headlight up. Kind of crazy. Let's see what else. Oh, another thing that's really neat. I got it cleaned out inside. Let me get a flashlight here. Got the interior a little bit cleaned out better. That's the grill over there. You can see that's pretty well made. What I find fascinating is this shifter. Looks like it's all handmade, but really well done. At first, I thought it was cables. Those are actually steel rods that go down to the 3-speed trans. Little bit of a knocking noise in it, but I think that's, I don't think that's a rod or anything. I think I know what that is. So I think maybe there's a piece of metal or something that got caught in one of the cylinders. So I got to go fish that out. That's a steering wheel that came with it. And then this is how the fuel tanks mount back here. That's one of them right there. The other one over there with a rag in it. Found a bunch of dead mice in them. got some answers now with the help of Mike Puma and a number of other automotive historians that have pitched in to help, but mainly Mike. We now know who built the car. It was a gentleman by the name of Smith out of Nevada. He had a successful steel fab business in the 1920s, built a number of race cars, speedboats, even an airplane. And this is the very last car that he built. We're not sure yet how early it was built. We know it had to be before 1964 because that's when it was first registered for the road. Could have been as early as 1948 and possibly had an engine change. Don't know because the engine's 1956 312 Ford. The axles are 48 Ford. Styling suggests early 1950s. Still not sure about the purpose. Some kind of racing, possibly land speed record kind of stuff, although I don't see it going fast enough for that. But I'm hoping that you folks, somebody old enough to remember, might have seen this car back in the 50s or 60s. If you have, please let me know so I can get more of the story.